it sometimes, some people who aren't quite familiar with what we do as when we're working on Foley, is they would first go to the real object or the real thing, and that's not necessarily the right choice. And most of these props in these science fiction fantasy films are plastic or resin or anything like that, and so we're always looking for alternative. I've seen a few wonderful videos that you've done for like ABC News and some of the other things, where you, like for handling a lightsaber, for example, it was some odd tools and things like that, and it kind of quashes some of these fans ideas of what we do when you're just picking up a pair of tongs or something, and yeah, this is Ray's lightsaber,
I know. I hope it inspires. I hope it enhances the fun, the kind of creativity, because one of the things that Star Wars is really, I think that is part of the entire scope of every show and the whole aesthetic of it is that it's actually quite quirky. We have so many funny aliens, we have so many funny dialects. Like, I mean, the dialogue alone is just so charming. Yeah. That I would hope that knowing, kind of looking behind the curtain, and I'm actually one of the few I think Foley artists that is not afraid to share what I use for something, just because I think that it can be used for multiple things, or another, it might instigate some ideas for someone else to use it for something else.
Sure.
I would hope that everybody would take some sort of ownership and change it in a way that would be meaningful to them or something, and not necessarily just use it exactly. But
of course. Well, everybody has a different performance style and stuff.
Well, and for me, I change it. It's not always the same. Yeah. So it just really depends, especially, I do think of the Star Wars universe, especially in terms of good versus bad. It's the entire dichotomy. Like that is what has made the entire franchise. It's very good, very bad. So all of my sounds encompass that. This is my good ship. This is my bad ship. This weapon belongs to one of these big troopers in a red suit or something. Wow, it's going to have to be massive. Oh, this one's Lando's. We're going to make it a little like saucy and fun. Those are the kinds of things that I think about.
Star Wars has built up on, obviously the work of Ben Burtt in the original films is so iconic, and he set so many precedents, and that library that Matt and Dave pull from, but create new things, and sort of that feeling of the sort of functional, used, kind of rusty fantasy science fiction kind of, it had a sound all its own, and it's so distinctive, and the way Ben worked recording like elements that you can still pull, little elements, a certain metal squeak that has been used for multiple pieces of equipment in this universe, and reapply it so that suddenly it sounds Star Wars. Are you finding that with your props and things like that? Tell me a bit about
super involved
more about your collection of props.
Yeah, it's when I first I think it was one of the first things, like, everybody is familiar when we first started learning about Foley, meaning in modern day, it was the DVD extras, right? Yeah, that was when we started getting all of these like fun videos. And one of them was a really beautiful video of Denny Thorpe doing Jurassic Park. And it was the little dinosaur cracking out of its shell, and, them handling it. And the reason I bring that one up is it's a really sweet, really nice, solid fantasy. It's complete fantasy. It wasn't anything, in reality, and it was so subtle and so effective that it just stayed with me for so long. And when I hear all the stories of Ben, when I talk to Ben about like how he came up with these sounds, and I ask him sometimes, I'm like, so what didn't work before that?
That's right? Always a very good question, so you can rule out things immediately.
How you get to that, right? So that's kind of how my thinking always operates in this, like, what's something that I know the sound of, or like what in my head makes sense for that sound. Like, and I look at, again, something like BB-8, or even like the porgs, and I'm like, okay, so how big is a porg? Okay, the porgs are like this big, and they're kind of heavy, kind of like a big pigeon or a puffin or something, and they have like regular kind of feet. And Margie had a completely different prop than I did to do them, and they sounded wonderful because they were different and they enhanced each other. So she had some like kind of funny rubber gloves, and I ended up with these, like, I don't exactly know what they are, but they're like little plastic pads that they almost look like flip-flops that I could put on my fingers and just kind of do like little patty feet like that. And things like that, I think that's also why how Matt and Dave think about things is they're really trying to think of them in kind of an honorary, like, let's keep that alive. Let's go and record something. So that way we're using the specific recording. Let's not just pull from a library. Let me not just make some, sound from some generator in, plug in. Let me go and use some recordings. Chris Garabozio's told me about that for Rogue One, that he was like mixing in Canada or something. And he was like listening to the automatic door of the hotel open and close. And he was like, that could be kind of cool for K2SO. And he like starts recording it and he brings it back to the ranch and he's like, yeah, of course it's like too noisy or whatever. It's not actually going to work. But instead he just goes to the garage and there's an automatic door in the garage of the ranch's building. And and it's quiet enough. So he records that and it works great. And that inspires me so much when I think about my props and my thinking about it. Some people I notice tend to use something that looks like what the prop is.
Yeah, see, that's a big rookie mistake.
And I
sometimes.
really don't like that. I know that some people have used like those, there's a straight drill and it kind of looks like a lightsaber. And so they want to use it for that. And it's very plastic and it was used for years. And I was the one to kind of start changing. I'm like, no, let's like not use this. Why are we using plastic? I don't really understand. So for me, it's all about, again, context. There's some plastic, fine, for Star Wars, we call it composite. We call it all kinds of space surface or something.
Terms, the space floor.
Oh my gosh, did you see the video of David Parker and Rian Johnson mixing? It's hysterical. There's this little Instagram video of Rian Johnson and he and David Parker mixing episode 8. And he asks him, he turns to him, he's like, hey, David, what do you think that floor is?
They're doing the whole
David's modern... like, well, David's of course saying like what he sees, which is, hey, it looks like carpet. Because it's a set. So and then Ryan's like, well, yeah, okay, but like, what do you think it's supposed to sound like? David just looks at him and says, space floor. Well, that's like, there, you get it. You get my job. Now you know what I have to do. Is go
but that is from the famous Albert Brooks movie, Modern Romance, which is, one of our go-tos when we lecture about sound.
Totally. So that's why it was so funny, but I was like relating it to I was like, exactly. I'm the one who has to try and figure out what a space floor sounds like.
Well, the punchline of that whole scene is when the mixer just completely unimpressed, when Albert Brooks says, so what do you think? I think you saved the picture.
That was the delivery of David Parker was completely in line. Like it was amazing. He's like, space floor. So I loved it so much. It was a good one.
That's really fun.